Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's discussion on the US India economic agenda for 2021. As we all know, the US administration, under the leadership of President Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as vice president, is now in place, and most key cabinet positions are now confirmed. And work has begun with a flurry of executive orders and engagements. And while the administration assumes charge at an incredibly challenging period in global history against the backdrop of the COVID-19 pandemic, it also presents a number of opportunity areas for us to engage. Speaking to me today is Mr. Chandrajit Banerjee, Director General of the Confederation of Indian Industry. CB, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us for this very timely discussion. Let me begin by asking you, how do you see the current state of play and how do you characterize the current US-India relationship?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ruchita. The way I look at it is the India-US relationship has really strengthened pretty much steadily over time. And it's really built on some of our shared values, the values of democracy, the values of diversity. And what I find it most encouraging is to really see how this bilateral is India enjoying not only a bipartisan support from the Capitol Hill, but it's also broadening with greater convergence on many global issues. And the Indian diaspora influence, say, for instance, has grown tremendously. And it is pretty much well reflected in the number of Indian American appointees that we see in the Biden administration today. And of course, we have weathered quite a few ups and downs, if one might say. But through the last couple of decades, we have seen a very steady support for enhancing the strategic partnership with India, whether it is in areas like defense and security, or be it in areas like energy and technology, economic ties, and even people-to-people linkages.
Yes, indeed. We're seeing a very strong, multifaceted strategic partnership emerging with the United States. Since you mentioned support for the defense and security relationship, the US Secretary of Defense General Lloyd Austin is visiting India 19 to 21st March, and that really underscores that point. What would you say is on the industry agenda when it comes to defense cooperation?
The way I would really look at it is Secretary Austin's visit to India marks, of course, the first Biden administration's official visit, and as a part of its first international tour, which really speaks volumes about the significance of the defense or aerospace and high technology sectors in this relationship ecosystem. And the bilateral US-India defense relationship has actually strengthened in international cooperation, evolving from a sort of a buyer-seller dynamic in focusing on joint research, co-development, and production of high-end defense equipment, as well as strategic cooperation across the Indo-Pacific region. And that's very, very significant. And defense trade and investments are really key considerations for India and the US post-COVID economic recovery, as we see. And we'd like to, of course, see a much stronger integration of private sector in the official dialogues, visits, and the institutional mechanisms of co-production. Right? If co-production is to happen really in a meaningful way, that's going to be very, very important. And we also need to amplify research and innovation and encourage startups in defense. US companies also must look at India as the next defense manufacturing hub for its strategic location to actually export to Asia and even much beyond. And there is an opportunity for the US and India to actually collaborate for they could collaborate much more closely in supporting smaller companies, providing support, training and cooperation in standards, so that we can build a more resilient and a more reliable global defense supply chain, especially across the Indo-Pacific. And that's what I really want to underline. And from our India's perspective, investments are really needed in areas like the MRO for the aerospace and defense sector, for aftermarket services in the industrial manufacturing, small arms and ammunition, and the UAVs. Those are of really special interest to us.
Thank you for outlining our defense agenda. Coming to our bilateral trade and economic partnerships, we've seen some ups and downs there. What about the business world? Do you see this as an area where business could do better?
Well, business is an area where we can always do better. If you are talking about trade, we know that the US and India had several rounds of negotiations. Some disputes have resulted in retaliatory actions from both the sides. Both countries came close to negotiating, a small trade package, but that did not go through. There were also indications that we may look at a broader FTA, and we are yet to see what that new arrangement would look like. One of the critical points here is that we need to keep a big picture vision as the two major global economies that we are talking about. The government in India has indicated that we would be with the new USTR, talking on a fresh trade package. And from private sector, we certainly support a broader trade agreement which will provide mutual benefit. And if you really look at pre-pandemic, US-India trade peaked, we crossed 146 billion USD in 2019. However, with the impact of COVID-19, that's starting to show, and we are seeing a drop of about somewhere around 15%, if I'm right, in goods trade. But I think this will be sort of temporary, and the momentum will soon pick up again. And our last estimates really show that in the best case scenario, bilateral trade would need to grow at a CAGR of approximately 12%, just under 12%, if we were to reach the target of 500 billion, by 2030. To pick up trade in this context, we really need to look at areas where we can encourage greater trade through policy interventions, business development assistance, and identifying newer areas of cooperation.
Yeah, so it sounds like a really concerted cross-sector effort is needed to bolster trade at that strong rate of growth if we have to achieve the 500 billion aspiration within the decade. Do you feel investment is a stronger story between the trade and economic ties? How do you see the impact of Indian investment in the US especially?
So, on the economic side, the investment between India and the US has been pretty much rising as well. FDI in India increased 13%, with US amongst the top sources of investment. And on the reverse side, if you see, we have from CII, we have our own study, which we call the Indian Roots American Soils, which is the Indian investments going into the United States. And that finds that 150 odd Indian companies having invested over 22 billion US in the US, and that's our investments in the US, and generated or safeguarded close to about 125,000 odd jobs. So Indian companies have actually played a very, very critical and an important role in supporting the US economy, even through the pandemic. And nearly all major Indian corporate operations in the US were deemed as essential business and allowed to continue, which is again, something important to note. And they repurposed their factories to produce protective equipment. They doubled up production for packaging. They also launched virtual learning platforms to support school education, which is, again, extremely, extremely important and significant. And they rolled out tech apps for contact tracing, donated medicines and supplies for testing, and various things like that, much more actually. And in fact, continue to work with the US government and agencies at the national as well as at the regional levels to support their local economies and communities. So it's a very important and a very good story indeed.
Yes, a great story, that and one that doesn't get talked about as much. So thank you for sharing that. Indian companies are very much integrated in the economic and social fabric in the US. So considering the big picture, what would you say are industry's expectations for the Biden administration? And specifically, how can Indian industry really plug into the US-India agenda?
So this is something that we can have a very long and a separate detailed discussion, and we can go on and on. But I think that the expectations are high on this front. You know, President Biden has been a long-standing supporter of the US-India ties. Years ago, then Senator Biden had said that it was his dream that the two closest nations in the world would be India and the US, if you recollect. And in 2015, when I had the chance really to meeting the then vice president, he spoke of transforming the bilateral relationship into a global partnership based on shared values, interests, responsibilities. Today, we are in a great time and a place really to build on this foundation and strengthen our partnership and strengthen our friendship. And from my perspective, very quickly, I would like to, in brief, share three key areas which I would think should be the biggest priorities for our India and the US economic agenda. The first, of course, is the entire issue on coordination of the pandemic response. We have 6 MOUs in the US-India joint collaborations for vaccines, which are currently under development, in addition to several research initiatives aimed at developing therapeutics and diagnostics to combat the pandemic. And we also know about in the recent Quad what happened about this entire partnership of to combat the pandemic. That's a very good story to develop, and that really develops on India's strength, I would think. The second piece of this is strengthening the India-US trade relationship. And, let us not lose the progress and momentum that both the countries have really made on coming closer on trade issues. There are many areas we have come much closer than where we were, and we need to leverage that. And at the same time, consider the parameters of a broader trade agreement. We have to, if I can say, anticipate the areas where we will have disagreements and look at similar problems, but different types of different solutions, whether it is in the areas of goods trade, market access, services areas, or investment, or even mobility areas like totalization. We talk about standards, so many matters actually. And a flexible mobility system that really allows smooth flows of ideas, people, talent, and capital which is a part of enabling greater trade between the countries. So reviving the US-India Trade Policy Forum is going to be very critical. And that's something which I really wanted to underline, and strengthening the impact of the CEOs Forum in the US-India commercial dialogue. That's building confidence in India's IPR regime, defense manufacturing, establishing a digital economy, and an innovation-based sort of partnership. Those would be very important drivers of the increased business engagement. And the third piece, which I really wanted to say in today's context, and it is very critical, is expanding the sustainability cooperation. And as a world leader, if one can say, in the fight against climate change, India really has welcomed the US's rejoining the Paris Climate Agreement. This is very important, significant. But US and India's joint collaboration, if one can say, can have a phenomenal transformational impact. And under the president and under our prime minister, we would be pleased to really see partnership between both the governments and we would really support the initiatives that strengthen our economic engagement. Indeed, through a consultative process, the US as well as India can really together create very, very strong constructive collaborations which are needed to strengthen our bilateral partnership and support the global economy and livelihoods around the world.
Wonderful. So three key takeaways: coordinate on the pandemic response closer, strengthen our trade relationship, and expand on sustainability cooperation. Indeed, a very strong agenda for the US-India economic partnership. CB, thank you so much for sharing your views with us on Indian industry's expectations and ideas to build on our economic cooperation. And thank you for everyone for tuning in to listen to this discussion. We have consolidated these thoughts and ideas from Indian industry into a comprehensive document on the US-India Economic Agenda 2021. We will link the full document in one of the posts. And as always, CII North America will work very closely in partnership with our stakeholders here in the US as well as in India to take forward this collaborative agenda.